Thank you for tuning in. We're going to be reviewing our unit, the historical development of the Constitution. Let's begin with the Articles of Confederation. This is the first Constitution of the United States. It's the first time that Americans see themselves as Americans, and they have this idea of national unity. And the Articles of Confederation forms a loose friendship between each of the states. And it really puts them on the road to that American identity. Now, the Articles of Confederation did have some strengths. They helped us win the American Revolution and defeat England in the war. And also all that new land out west, they helped us create guidelines on how to divide up that land and how to make that land into states, and how to admit them into our country. So Congress is using the Articles of Confederation to try and manage national issues. But the Articles of Confederation had a lot of weaknesses. The federal government had almost no power. They couldn't tax, they couldn't support their army, they couldn't pay their soldiers. And to make any decision, they needed 9 of the 13 states to agree for them. That's like a super majority. They also had no specific currency, so each state had their own form of money. So the states had all of the power. The states were extremely powerful. They're independent governments. It was almost like having 13 individual countries. So after the American Revolution, the colonies are starting to fight and argue, and they can't get anything done because there's just not a strong enough federal government. It all winds up leading to something we call Shays' Rebellion. This weak federal government, there's no money, this fighting between the states, they're not respecting each other. Well, Shay was a farmer, and he was in debt. So this lack of similar money and shortages, it resulted in death for a lot of people, particularly in Massachusetts, where farmers were growing wheat. So Shay begins to lead this rebellion. He's a veteran of Bunker Hill, and he sends his militia. Massachusetts sends their militia to stop Shay in his tracks. Now, Shay's army is weak, and they run away. But people are starting to wonder about how strong the Articles of Confederation are, if they can really govern the nation. And it signals to the country that they need to reform these articles. They need to change them. So all the states decide to go meet in Philadelphia in 1787, and they send a delegate. And this is known as the Constitutional Convention. And they decide to create a more perfect union, meaning a better government for our country, to unite the states. They went there to change the articles, not to get rid of them. But what winds up happening is they can't. They can't come to these agreements, and the Articles of Confederation are so flawed, they decide to just get rid of them and rewrite a whole new constitution that we know today. So one issue is they needed a leader for this constitutional convention. They choose George Washington. He was the leader of the Continental Army. He's extremely well respected. So Washington agrees to serve as the convention's president. And at this convention, they have 3 main issues: how each state will be represented, slavery, and if there should be a president, and if we do have a president, how many should there be? Don't forget their fear of King George, of a tyrant leader. They just fought a war, so this is an issue. So let's begin with issue number 1, representation. How will the states be represented in the new government? There were 2 plans debated. One was put forward by Virginia. It was called the Virginia Plan, and it was based on your state's population. The more people you have, the more representatives you have, and you can send to Congress, meaning the House of Representatives. The New Jersey Plan says all states should be equally represented, meaning no matter the population, if you have a lot of people or just a few people, you should have an equal number of representatives, because then it makes certain states more powerful than others. Well, what they decided to do is come to a compromise, also known as the Great Compromise. So they used both plans. They used a bicameral legislature. That means two houses. One house is the House of Representatives. The other house is the Senate. The House of Representatives is based on the Virginia Plan. So it's based on population of each state. Whereas the Senate is based on the New Jersey Plan, where each state has 2 senators. So now we have a bicameral legislature. It was a compromise. They used both plans. So this way, large and small states would be happy with the type of representation they were receiving in the federal government. Issue 2, slavery. Are slaves people? Are they property? If they're people, they should have rights. They should count for representation. If they're property, they should not have rights, and they should not be counted for representation. I'm sure you can imagine the North did not want the slaves to count, while the South did want the slaves to count. This way they had more representation in Congress. Well, they arrived at a compromise as well. It was called the 3/5 Compromise, and they decided that slaves will only count as 3/5 of a person for representation. That was in our Constitution. So it allows Congress to move on to other issues without dividing the country further. Issue number 3 was about having our chief executive, our president. How many presidents should there be? 1 president will be able to make quick decisions, but they're kind of like a king. And what happens if they're assassinated? 3 presidents, well, they couldn't be assassinated that quickly, and it's, representative of more groups, but it's also very indecisive because there's not a clear vision from one person. What they decided to do was have 1 president and 1 vice president. I hope this clarified some of the issues that they discussed at the Constitutional Convention. I also want to review with you federalism, which is a major issue discussed there as well. Okay, here we are, federalism. This is the concept that makes our country and our Constitution work. On one side, we have national or federal powers. On the other, we have state powers. This federalism, the definition of federalism is the division of federal and state powers. Now, they also share certain powers. Those are called concurrent powers. So if you take a look on our Venn diagram right here, state powers, meaning just the state has, for example, New York State, they would have the power to establish local governments, set up schools, regulate state commerce, make laws about marriage, and establish and regulate corporations, meaning businesses. The federal or national government can do things like maintain the military, declare war, they can create a postal system, and protect copyrights and patents. And concurrent powers that they share, are taxes, court systems, regulating commerce, which means trade, regulating bank laws, borrowing money, and providing for the general welfare of their people, the people living there. Also punishing criminals and laws like that. But this idea that the federal government can have power as well as the state government, this is what makes our country successful. And this idea of federalism was a major idea that was discussed at the Constitutional Convention. Okay, so I hope this helped with your review. Thank you for tuning in.